We're going to go ahead and get kicked off live for today's topic, which is integrating disparate technologies to create an agile LIMS. Today's session is presented by Cerebrum and Astrix technology. We can go to the next slide, please. Now, before we get into the presentation portion, I'm going to take a moment and just introduce you to Astrix technology. If this is the first webinar of ours that you've been on, welcome, and we hope you come to many more as we host these on several per month, where we are bringing together the thought leaders from throughout the laboratory informatics and technology space and giving them an opportunity to kind of present their thoughts on where laboratory and R&D technology is going and how they fit into the grand scheme of things, etc. But who is Astrix and what do we do in this world? From a company snapshot standpoint, we deliver highly specialized services, processes, and technology, as well as outsourced services that we hope fundamentally transforms how science-based businesses operate. We do this in an effort to improve scientific outcomes in the lives of people everywhere. The company was established in 1995, privately held. We originated in the IT division of APBI, a life science research organization. We operate from 7 offices in the United States in beautiful Costa Rica, and our headquarters are in Red Bank, New Jersey. We are a market leader in dedicated digital transformation services and expert outsourced services for the scientific community. And we typically help Fortune 1000 life science companies, chemical, CPG, government, research institutions, generally speaking, those that have fast-growing IT, outsourced, or compliance needs. Now, in terms of the, we can go to the next slide. In terms of the actual solutions that we deliver, we like to think we span the entire life cycle of scientific data systems, and this begins with, companies will contract with Astrix to come in and help them understand what their technology needs are first and foremost. What is their research and development technology stack going to look like? Is it going to be a migration to the cloud? Is it going to be a combination, et cetera? What does that tech stack look like? And we do that through business process analysis and then enterprise architecture design work, all designed to help optimize how your organization runs, of course. And then we can work to help you select those right technologies. We're vendor agnostic, so we can help bring in the right technologies based on what we find in those first 2 sessions. Or first 2 projects, I should say. And then we can assist with development and implementation if need be. And we can also, of course, do computer systems validation of these solutions when done. We have services after the fact where we can be an ongoing resource to help ensure that your systems are constantly updated, upgraded, and people are trained on them. And then finally, we can actually staff people. We can staff scientific personnel. We can staff technical personnel to help run these systems. So that's a little bit about who Astrix is. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our speaker, and let me take a moment and introduce Tom. Tom, we can go to the next slide. So Tom Miller is Marketing and Business Development Director at Cerebrum. He's responsible for establishing growth objectives, developing lead gen and brand positioning programs to accomplish the growth objectives, and monitoring customer market trends to drive critical business development insights and drive scaling initiatives. So since 1996, Tom has advised or participated in the formation of more than 25 other high technology startups in life sciences. This includes medical diagnostics, LCD OLED displays, computer graphics, and semiconductors. So a great background, obviously, from Tom's side of the fence, and it's my pleasure to introduce him. Tom, I'm going to go ahead and sit quietly back, and with the rest of the folks, enjoy the presentation. I'll come back on at the end.
Good morning, and thanks for taking time out today to listen to this short but hopefully very informative session. This is the agenda for today's presentation. I'm going to review some of the current challenges for clinical LIMS adaptation in a digital world, 3 keys to discovering value add and value leakage, the benefits of a platform strategy, what LabDivas, our product, offers for clinical AP and CRO laboratories, and then wrap up for Q&A. When you think about converting to digital from a combination of manual and instrument-based tracking systems and management systems, there is constant pressure to reduce cost and find new revenue streams. The government helped the industry along in the clinical laboratory space by legislating an act called PAMA, which dictated cost reduction actions that had to be taken at the lab level. And of course, there's constant changes going on in the compliance area with respect to more reporting, more detailed reporting, and more frequent inspections. So first, what we believe is a big opportunity and is chain of custody tracking and recording. Some laboratories do a good job with the existing systems, but frequently those systems are hybrid. So the LIS portion, which is the information system for running the laboratory, is independent of the sample tracking system. And therefore, there are problems with moving data easily between those two. Who did what, when, and how is really the critical information that has to be tracked, and the data needs to be clean. And what we've learned over the last 10 years of being in this business is that there are a lot of metadata extensions that can be added to improve not only the tracking and recording, but also improve overall lab operations. The second or the third big challenge is the fact that laboratories tend to be a mix of old and new instruments and systems. Each instrument can have a proprietary format and communication interface. We frequently see older instruments with only a serial port interface. Obviously, the industry has moved forward from the world of serial port, and more frequently, and especially for new instruments coming into the lab, we're seeing Ethernet and USB connections, high-speed USB connections, which make it a little bit easier from a systems management point of view. But in every case, the data protocol associated with the particular instrument can be widely diverse. And while there are some industry standards like HL7 and now FHIR is wending its way into the industry, nevertheless, the highest performance interfaces are always API based, and that requires that there be clarity between the instrument manufacturer and the particular LIMS system that you're trying to create, so that you can get the best performance and the least amount of hassle associated with management. In addition, there are multiple EMR and practice management platforms that we experience as we interface with different laboratories. And again, the same problem exists with proprietary formats and proprietary communications interfaces. And in particular, when you're going outside your lab to gather data, there's a lot of security aspects that need to be monitored. So that is very important. And then finally is the innovation, the introduction of genomics panels, typically with some form of NGS instrument and or instrument cluster, and that data tends to be non-discrete. So there's typically a lot of analysis, of bioinformatic analysis that has to take place. And when you think about moving to digital, what you want is you want to create an agile platform that can support new disciplines and practices like molecular, genomics, NGS, that may not have been useful to you in the past if you're primarily an anatomic pathology kind of practice. So what we've found is that the keys to discovering value, whether they're a value add or value leakage, lie in three different areas. First, and this is an expertise that Astrix brings to the table, comprehensive workflow mapping to find opportunities for automation. What we want is we want to look for repetitive or manual tasks that can be replaced by automation. And we want to look for opportunities to transfer data seamlessly. For example, if a pathologist wants to see the patient history, he wants to get that information instantaneously right at his microscope station. So he can look at the patient specimen, he can then look at the history. Maybe the history already had a pathology examination, so he can look at the prior performance. In most systems that are in the medium to physician-owned lab category, what you find is that the searching for the patient information is very tedious. It takes the pathologist's eyes off the slide to interface with the computer. And as one of our pathologists said when he brought up Lab Divas, he said, I was constantly waiting for the hourglass to quit turning. So I think that that's an opportunity for automation that is very useful. Second, you want to look at the management practices across the enterprise. So within the lab, what kind of asset performance is, first of all, measured, and then how does that compare to industry benchmarks? You want to look at inventory and resource utilization, in some cases, obsolescence. Having a robust system that can keep track of all of these different aspects of what's going on in your lab is very useful. And then finally, do you enforce good lab practices and overall quality? This is an area where the CLIA agency that is certifying high complexity labs takes a lot of interest in. And it's important that whatever system you use does a good job of helping the lab director and the lab personnel maintain good practices and keep meticulous records about what's happening. And then finally, look at data transparency, utilization, and analysis. And as I mentioned on the last slide, there are a lot of problems with respect to structured versus unstructured data, legacy systems and data pools, normalization of data to facilitate analysis, visualization, and to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's a good article in the most recent edition of Scientific Computing that discusses this in much more detail. Also, they interview a couple of key people at Astrix who are leaders in the industry. So what are the benefits then that you can realize as a result of having a platform strategy? And why do you even want one? So first, let me explain a little bit about what a platform strategy is. There's a new motion in the industry to get away from single-purpose information architectures and to move to a platform strategy which has a baseline of capabilities. And those capabilities include communication, data storage, data search, those kinds of information architecture elements that can support different kinds of applications that run across the top. This was really pioneered in the enterprise resource planning industry, and over the period of the last roughly 30 years has advanced to a very high level. So you want to have an SQL-like database underlying everything. You want to define what the information, the data architecture looks like, from the most atomic levels all the way up to the complexities associated with a particular diagnostic test that you're trying to implement. And everything should work seamlessly and be as fast as the resource, the computer systems can deliver it. There's nothing more frustrating to either a laboratory technician or a pathologist to again wait for the spinning hourglass in order to get on with the task that he's assigned. One of the big benefits is if the platform strategy is implemented correctly, it's very easy to accommodate future revenue streams like molecular testing or like NGS testing. There's really no need to change the underlying data architecture if it has been defined and implemented correctly. There are constant new laboratory standards that are coming out, new instruments, and new kinds of diagnostic tests. If your system is designed around a particular instrument manufacturer's system, then it could be extremely difficult to interface an instrument from another manufacturer. And a lot of time is wasted figuring out how to make two dissimilar instrument protocols talk to one another. Another key is the ability to optimize workflows and workforce loadings. With a very streamlined platform strategy, you can anticipate where technicians need to be and how many technicians are required in order to process a certain amount of patient specimens that are coming into your lab. There are inevitably rises and falls in the amount of specimen volume that you're processing. And so that's really important. And connected with that is provisioning in the cloud. First, a lot of labs are challenged by overflows of workflow. And so the lead time stretches out, the responsiveness in terms of service is impacted if you don't have elastic capacity. And what do I mean by that? I mean the ability to add new processor bandwidth when needed, but not pay for it when it's unnecessary. That's the big benefit you get from operating on a cloud-based system. Another big benefit is a very high level of security and uptime. For those of you who manage labs, you've probably already experienced getting a call in the middle of the night that they can't operate because the system has crashed. One of the nice things of being in a cloud-based environment, not that it never happens, but it's very infrequent. The uptimes are typically on the order of 4 nines to 5 nines of reliability. Uptime is really critical in terms of laboratory processing capability. The other important aspect is security. It's very important that you operate in a high level of security from a patient safety point of view. You don't want the ability for hackers to penetrate your system. And again, we're constantly fighting the battle of patching up holes that over time appear because hackers get smarter and smarter. And sometimes they're malicious, so they capture your system, they encrypt everything, and then they demand a ransom in order to free your system up. Two things that are really important in that aspect. One is regular backup strategies, and what we found in in our customer base, medium to physician-owned labs, medium-sized clinics, is that a backup is a nuisance. It's not a routine, and so by transferring that capability up to the cloud, it's no longer going to be a nuisance. It's just completely taken off of the laboratory stack. And finally, you don't have to do any server maintenance anymore because the server is not on premises. So from that point of view, there's a lot of benefits to be realized by moving to the cloud and making everything based on a platform strategy. So this is a short commercial in terms of what Cerebrum offers for the anatomic pathology and contract research organization laboratories. First, and I'll show you our architecture in a moment, we do offer support for multiple practices and scientific disciplines. We're not a totally general purpose system yet because we focused on AP and CRO for our market entry. We've already been through 2 generations of development. We're planning for a 3rd generation of development the end of next year, roughly, and with more features being added, more capabilities, and higher performance. We offer a pay-per-use subscription model, which means there's no upfront capital cost other than whatever capital expense associated with the installation and customization of the system. So that makes it much more flexible. Again, as your business ebbs and flows, you're going to be in a stronger position financially because you don't pay for capacity that you don't use. We have several patents in the field of our user interface technology, our macro-based diagnosis approach, and our macro-based scoring approaches. These are very important to pathologists and also to clinical trials kinds of applications, because record keeping and prediction of the impact of the particular specimen is really important. In the case of a clinical trial, you may get a lot of 500 to 1,000 mice brains, for example, and you're looking for results based upon a particular therapy that a new pharma business might have been developing. So that ability to do macro-based scoring is really important. Also, we're finding for cancer tests that there are many specialized scoring methods for cancer, and it's constantly evolving. So being able to apply a macro-based technique so you don't have to get out your calculator or open an analysis pane on your computer and figure things out is really helpful. The laboratory end-to-end digital workflow is really key. We capture patient samples as far out as where it's collected in an operating room or a clinic. Not every laboratory wants to reach out to their customers, which are the clinics or the operating rooms, but some are beginning to ask for that capability, and that's really important. So we induct these specimens at the collection point, track them on the logistics delivery, the courier, into the lab, and then all the information is available at the point of a session. The the patient data is available. The ordering information from the physician is available. The date codes are available. We've been able to detect a handoff problem where instead of 3 bags, they only collected 2 bags. There's 1 bag still back at the collection site, which is a failure at the courier level. And by barcoding from the point of collection all the way through this process, we're able to detect those kinds of issues, and we're able to remediate those kinds of issues very quickly. As you carry your diagnostic test through the different phases of your analysis, at each major station, there is the ability to have a customized work statement, work instruction appear at the station on a monitor, and for both the patient specimen and the operator to be barcoded in. If there are problems where an operator is trying to perform an operation but they're not trained, we can flag that. That's an issue that goes to the lab manager, and the lab manager then can resolve that. If you have an instrument which is uncalibrated, its calibration period has expired, we're able to detect that. If you have a control that is nearing the end of its life, we can detect those sorts of things. And the specimen workflow itself is fully customizable. So if new tests are defined, which require different pieces of equipment, we're able to very quickly do that configuration and make the support for that possible. I've already talked about cloud-based capability, and we've talked about the patient history capability. In a laboratory, as you're moving the specimen from place to place, from station to station, think about it very much like a Amazon warehouse, where as your material moves through the warehouse, you want the ability to figure out where that particular specimen is at any point in time and what its current status is. That is really a new capability that older systems don't necessarily have, or so that's a good reason why you might want to move to a platform-based strategy. We have the ability to track consumption of consumables. So we're able to flag that reagent levels, for example, are getting low. And this is all fully configurable at the lab manager or lab director desk, so they don't suddenly run out of a particular chemical and have to halt processing while they resupply. Certainly over the last year in the world of COVID, supply chain issues are constant, and being able to predict where consumption might run out, where a chemical might run out, is really important. Then we were very sensitive in our early design efforts at the job of the pathologist who is actually analyzing the results of the test. What we found was that most pathologists pre-Lab Divas used a transcription service to translate their diagnosis and their clinical notes into a report that could be sent to a customer. But depending upon the test, that diagnosis report was very routine. And so we were able to develop a custom for each lab templates for diagnosis reporting, and we were able to add synoptic reporting capability. So as the industry evolves, as the medical compliance capabilities are added, we've already developed a lot of those capabilities and anticipated those changes as they're occurring. In addition, we also found that the lab manager or lab director spent a lot of time after hours writing reports about the results of his lab operation. Simple metrics like how many specimens were processed, how many alerts were raised, current status of the equipment. All of those sorts of things would take hours to run on existing systems. So we've streamlined all of that and again developed customization capabilities so that it can be unique for each lab, but the underlying architecture to deliver that is very standard. And as the new requirements are developed, we can lay those new requirements in without disrupting the way in which the lab uses that information. EMR integration, we also interface to billing systems. So one of the things that we've learned from our customers is that the order in which the diagnosis codes are presented is important in terms of getting prompt invoice approval and adjudication of claims. So by managing that process and learning with each individual lab what their issues are with all of the different kinds of insurance that they contract with, we're able to streamline that process and avoid a lot of telephone calls and expediting calls to actually get paid. Along with lab operation and metrics and very flexible future growth opportunities. So we pretty much eliminate any capital expense and make it all an operating expense, which is easier to get approval for and easier to predict. So what we did in Cerebrum, we developed a workflow suite, which is the backbone, and that's the area where we worried about things like the database architecture, the communications architecture, and the reporting architecture. And then we connected different capabilities depending upon the particular application that or laboratory that we were working with. So the figures in gray are actually at the alpha test level. We're not offering those capabilities to the broad customer base yet. Anything with a white background is a standard product today. So across the top, you see things like Cerebrum Connect, Cerebrum Nexus, Cerebrum Registrar, Cerebrum Vault, and Cerebrum Cortex. And offline, we can have conversations with you about the specifics of what those elements are, and for those that are in gray, when they will be available generally. On the bottom side, we're talking about individual product capabilities. So LabVivus Clinical is the product that we offer for anatomic pathology laboratories. There are 3 different versions for that. One version for gastroenterology, one version for urology, and one version for dermatology. As we interface with different laboratories, there may be other capabilities that we add, like cardiology or like oncology, that today are not standard products, but are relatively easily configured based upon our overall architecture. The screenshot that you see is the laboratory director's dashboard. And each one of those lines, I realize they're almost impossible to see, is the current state of some operating metric that they track on a daily, hourly, by the minute basis. And red indicates a problem area, green indicates trouble-free, and yellow or orange are warning indicators saying you probably need to take a look here. It's not critical, but it could turn critical. LabDivas Research is a product that we developed primarily for clinical trial applications. So contract research organizations, pharmaceutical companies, and biotech development companies are interested in these kinds of capabilities. LabDivas Veterinary is a new product that we're at the beta test level in right now. We're definitely open to taking new customers. Now, veterinary is not your neighborhood vet clinic. Veterinary is designed for veterinary pathology. What does that mean? Well, you probably remember, some of you, because maybe you're still too young to remember, you remember the mad cow worry that people had, or you've probably heard about anthrax contamination. Veterinary pathology clinics or laboratories are responsible for detecting those kinds of things. In your household pet, whether it's a cat or a dog or a bird, they're looking for cancer. They're looking for tumors that represent pathological diseases that need intervention. For your farm animals like pigs and chickens and cows and horses, there are other diseases that a pathologist trained as a veterinary pathologist can help with diagnosing. And then the last area, which is an area we've been developing for the last couple of years, is genomic support. Genomics certainly represents challenges because the data that's created by a typical genomic sequence is huge. And if you're doing millions of genetic sequences per month, like the larger corporations, Quest, the LabCorp, some hospital labs, then this is an area where it can be highly automated and where there is a lot of opportunity for innovation in terms of your ability to do multiplex testing and detect many different genomic variants simultaneously and retain the data so that later on you can come back and run tests against the data without requiring a new sample to be collected from the patient. What are our major benefits? I've already discussed a lot of these. We think of that in terms of three classes. We think about patient safety because there's nothing worse than delivering the wrong diagnosis to the wrong patient at the wrong time. So being able to make sure that the patient and the specimen are tracked religiously throughout the entire process is very important. Occasionally there are problems with mislabeling somewhere in the middle of the process or even at the beginning of the process. And by developing a system which is focused on each individual specimen gets treated individually, what we call a single piece workflow, we're able to quickly detect those kinds of problems and correct them. And then being able to offer complete operation visibility gives us gives the lab management system, people the ability to track everything that's happening and maintain the level of compliance that they want, which leads us to the next level. What we've learned over time is that two-factor authentication is really important. Some, particularly smaller labs, find that to be a nuisance. What we've discovered is actual cases where not doing two-factor authentication has created problems. So whenever that happens, of course, with first call we get is, oh my God, I just lost a piece of data, I lost a report. With two-factor authentication, no one can mess with the system that's not already authorized and trained in how to use it. We also built in tracking so that if a piece of data is lost, a report didn't get sent out. We can detect all of those things, and we flag those events to the lab management. Frequently, we'll get calls that I wanted to send a report to physician A, and he didn't receive it, and we find that it's queued up in the transfer mechanism because for some reason at the physician's office they changed the fax number, or they changed the URL, so we can't connect electronically. Those kinds of things drive the laboratory management crazy, so we built in a lot of double and triple checking capability. So not only can we detect an event, but we can also recover from an event. Pre-filled forms and synoptic reporting is important because what we want to do is we want to avoid as much as possible any manual data entry. Obviously, each pathologist has certain abilities to make notes and add to the diagnosis description, and that's really critical, but they don't want to have to look up a CDT, a diagnostic code. They don't want to make an error by coding it incorrectly and then having adjudication problems. So we know from the original order that was written by the physician, the ordering physician, what that CDT should be, and whether or not the CDT had the order had the correct clearances to be claimed. All of these categories of security and compliance are tedious. Lab managers don't want to be bothered by that. They're primarily human resource managers and systems level managers and trainers. They don't want to worry about their IT system. And then finally, cost savings. So when we originally started out, we were 10 plus years ago thinking about replacing clipboards and Excel spreadsheets with some simple automation. And as we implemented those factors, we started discovering other areas. So today, a typical pathologist will say that he's able to sign out cases 4 times faster than he could with his old system. That over the entire lab expense budget, they improve efficiency by about 30%. In fact, pathologists say that since I don't need a transcriptionist anymore, the lack of a transcriptionist pays for the entire cost of the system. I mentioned before that there are very low or no startup costs and no capital investment because we're able to introduce LabDiva seamlessly. and there's a very fast ROI where whatever startup expenses were incurred are recaptured typically in less than 12 months. So all of these aspects of capabilities are important. We often talk about what's the difference between a LIS and LIS and a LIMS, LIMS. And an LIMS is a LIS with tracking. So you get 2 for 1. You buy a LIS, and if it's a LabDivas LIS, then you're also getting a sample specimen tracking. We have several customers that are big players in the industry. One of the phenomenon going on in the anatomic pathology business is there are groups of individual laboratories that are joining together to get economies of scale on back-end processes and asset utilization. So United Urology Group and GI Alliance are 2 examples of that. Underneath United Urology Group is Arizona Urology Specialist, which was one of our very first customers, and has been now through the migration from generation 1 to generation 2 of LabDivas. And then there are some smaller physician-owned laboratories like Mesquite in Tucson, that is a gastroenterology and surgery center. There we have one veterinary customer. I mentioned that it's at the beta level. We'll be offering that to any customer right away now that Fishhead Labs is operational. And we have 2 clinical trials customers that are CROs. Sorry, my mouse got out of control. These are a few testimonials that we've captured from pathologists, and they're pretty flattering, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't have picked them. Dr. Dan Jondal says, no other LIS on the market is as efficient and robust as LabDivas. At this point, Cerebrum, over its history, is now touching literally millions of patients' lives. So to wrap up, what does an Agile LIMS offer compared to a standalone, not platform-based system? These are some examples of important options that really justified all of the development that we've done over the history of the company. Customization, pre-filled and synoptic reporting options, supporting multiple practices and scientific disciplines, adapting to new instruments, new processes, and new protocols, immediate access to patient histories without duplicating medical records. So there's no leak in the system where a patient record has been transferred to a laboratory from a clinic or a hospital or a doctor's practice. The patient history stays where it originates, and we just connect to it electronically. Streamlining of the specimen process and eliminating the error-prone manual data entry, as well as significantly reducing patient record searches across different systems. Illuminating where the staffing, training, and efficiency deficiencies exist, and reducing the number of menu options. You don't want to have a drop-down menu with 27 different things to select. You only want to see those menu options that are important for the kind of case that you're treating. and it's totally under the pathologist and lab manager's control. In many cases, eliminating any kind of transcription delays and errors. So thank you for your time. Kevin, we're open for questions.
Yeah, I think we're probably up against it a little bit, Tom. So what I'm going to do is, if there's questions that folks, I don't have any active ones on the floor right now, but I want to make sure that if you have something you want to send in to Mike Zakowski, you're welcome to do so, or certainly you can reach directly out to Cerebrum. Let me go ahead. I need to get the audio portion